Hey guys, how's everybody doing out there? I picked up this Stevens 620 shotgun about a year ago when Gander Mountain was going out of business. Got this thing for 89 bucks, which I thought was a steal. Always wanted me a trench gun. The Winchester 97s are a little bit out of my price range. Even the Chinese Norinco ones are getting up there in price. So I figured for 89 bucks I could get this, grab a heat shield, do a little woodwork, and come out with a trench gun for a real good price. So I'm going to get going on this conversion project. I looked on YouTube, on other places online for a couple videos on how to convert this. Didn't really find anything. I found one real good video that showed a real nice finished product, but that was actually just some guy, he sent it off to have it done by a gunsmith. I figured it was something simple enough I could do it myself. So I read up online. I saw that you could chop the barrel down to, a lot of places say 20. One fairly reputable place I found said 21 inches. So that's where I got this taped off right now, is at 21 inches. With the heat shield on there, sitting on there, you want to leave this at about a half an inch of barrel exposed. So roughly right there is where that heat shield is going to sit. I verified this by looking at pictures of original ones, and it does look like there's about a half an inch of barrel sitting out on the edge. And the rear of the heat shield, if I can focus, right where that heat shield curves down is going to be right on the edge of the handguard in the forward position. So I'm going to put this sucker up in a vise. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video right now, but I will be right back when I got it all set up in the vise and I'll start cutting. Alrighty, so I've got the gun in the vise. It was kind of nice because the receiver has a little flat cutout. I don't know if you can see it down there, right where your loading gate is. And I was able to just rest that on the flat of the bottom of my vise. So that helped get it fairly level. Over at the end of the barrel, right by where I'm cutting, I had a couple rolls of tape. I just found some that fit snug under there. I got that supported. A block of wood, some books, whatever you got should work. I don't know if that's really necessary. I just felt a little more comfortable having some support right where I'm going to cut. And I got a nice old, fairly dull hacksaw blade, so that's going to be fun. I would recommend running out and purchasing a new blade for your hacksaw. I don't really feel like leaving the house, so I'm going to be using this one. That being said, I did actually tape my barrel. I apologize, earlier I said 21 inches. It's 20 and a half inches. And that is measured not from the end here, but from the end of the chamber, which is on the inside of the receiver. It's about here. So I put the tape at 21 and a half and a little bit extra inches. It's probably about 21 and like 9/16. It's just a little bit more. I figured because I am using a little bit of a duller blade, I'm going to have a very rough edge. I'll probably need to take that to the belt sander and then file it and polish it to make sure I have a nice, smooth, even 90-degree crown on there. I probably will bevel the internal edges, just like on here. It's not much. It's pretty much 90 degrees, but it's not a sharp edge on the inside. So I probably will bevel this here. What's nice is the trench guns were just a standard cylinder choke. That's what this gun originally was as well. So I don't really have to do any like crazy threading or worry about screwing up any patterns or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting. I apologize, I don't have a tripod for my camera. I'm actually just using my iPhone. So I'm going to put this down, start cutting away, and I'll get back to you when I'm done cutting. Something that I forgot to mention that is very, very important whenever you're cutting or sanding anything, especially anything metal, wear eye protection. You don't want any little splinters of anything getting into your eye. It's going to be a really not fun time. Whew, alrighty, so I'm about 5 minutes in of just straight cutting. Two things. Definitely buy a new saw blade. Steel is tough. I've heard a lot of people say when they're cutting shotgun barrels that they were a lot softer steel than they expected. But when you got a dull blade, soft steel is still steel. Another thing, definitely do what I did and leave a little bit of extra space. If I can tell, I'll see if I can get a closer shot in here. Let's see. This is going to be an absolutely butchered crown right now. Like I said, luckily I did leave a little extra space, so that should clean up just fine with a little sanding and polishing. But you can see how it's kind of wavy. I have a crazy feeling that because the blade I used is dull, I'm going to have a lot of kind of like shredding look in there. That's going to require some cleanup. Alright, I'm going to finish up this last little bit, and I'll get right back to you. Alrighty, got the front portion of the barrel off. And man, oh man, is that a beautiful job. Just hope you know I am completely joking. This is pretty gross. I wish iPhones would focus up close. There we are. So you can tell there's all those cutting marks, tooling marks, if you will. I'm going to try to clean some of this off real quick, just see what is, what's going to need to be sanded off and what's just kind of like metal. I did use some oil. I don't have cutting oil, I just used some Hoppy's oil. Oh yeah, so a lot of this is going to need to be sanded off. That's just torn metal in there, destroying my Q-tip. Yeah, so this is mostly going to need to be sanded off. But I did leave a good 1/16 to an eighth of an inch extra. So I will be taking that to my belt sander and cleaning that up. I'm going to peel the tape off. Definitely, guys, if you're going to try anything like this or cutting any barrel, use a new blade. Luckily, it does seem to be a pretty good, even 90-degree cut. Doesn't look too off angle. So I'm not really going to have any like grinding to do, just a little cleaning up of this edge, which is pretty gross. So here's the length of it after cutting. I'm going to grab the heat shield and I'll compare it with the heat shield on. Let me move these tape. I am really glad I put this tape here because I did have to put some decent pressure on the barrel while cutting. So it's going to line up right about there. If you look, there's going to be about a ½ an inch sticking out. Alright, let me move out to the garage. I'm going to take this to the sander, and I will be right back with you. Alright, I'm out in my garage. Got my belt sander set up. I'm doing this on the floor so I don't get metal shavings all over my table. Make sure when you're sanding you wear eye protection and also a face mask or a respirator of some sort. I just have one of those like felt papery kind of like doctor's office face masks. It helps keep stuff out of your mouth, out of your nose. You definitely don't want any metal shavings up in there. It's not fun. Alright, so I got the guide set up at 90 degrees. I'm not going to really be removing any material since I did get a pretty squared off cut. All I'm going to be doing is taking down the rough edge on the bore. Let's see if I can get some of that on video real quick. Yeah, so this is really, really rough like you saw earlier. Here's a little better shot of it. You can see all the marks from the saw. I'm just going to clean that up. I'm not going to worry about beveling anything. I'm going to do that by hand. Let me get the sander going, and I'll have at it. There we are. One thing I noticed after sanding it a bit was that I'm not quite at 90 degrees. Come on, focus. Alright, well anyway, I got all those really, really rough machining marks out, but my edge is a little kind of, it's not really like off 90 degrees, but it's kind of warbly. If you see here at the top, I wish it focused better, there we are. The top kind of starts out straight and then it comes in a little and then back out, kind of like an S. I didn't worry about that on the belt sander. I'd really rather not screw up by taking off too much material. There we are, focused. You can probably see it a little better. So I'm gonna use a file and try to fix that, straighten that up by hand. It's important when you're doing stuff like this to go little by little. I didn't want to try to fix anything on the belt sander because it would be very easy to take off, a large chunk of metal and go, all the way down to where I don't need it to be. So I'm just going to do this by hand, clean it up a little bit. After I file, I'm going to use some sandpaper to try to polish it up, make it a little bit nicer. And then I do have some, what is it? It's not flitz. It's a turtle wax, a rubbing compound. It's actually just like a slightly abrasive material for like polishing cars. I'm going to go ahead and use that after I file and sand to make sure that my crown is nice and polished and shiny. I am gonna, when I file, I'm gonna knock down these sharp edges and bevel it just a little on the inside and the outside. Not a whole lot, just enough to not be a sharp corner. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I will get right back to you. So I took a file and I filed this down pretty nice and flat. Got it at a near perfect 90 degrees, as best as I can do with my naked eye. And then I took the file and rounded off the edges. I got a little overzealous up here. That's fine, I'm going to leave that as is. I didn't really take off any metal, I just took off the finish. But I got a nice little bevel here, all the way around. And then I didn't use the file on the inside, I just used some sandpaper to just barely knock off that corner. And if you look though, it is still pretty rough on the outside. Definitely not as bad as when I first cut it. But I am going to go ahead and take some of this stuff here. It's just a turtle wax rubbing compound. I'm just going to put some on a cloth patch and have at it on the barrel. A lot of people will use like the buffing attachment on a Dremel. I don't need to get this thing shiny, I just want to get all these scratches out of here. So I'm just going to go ahead and gently rub that in. And do this by hand. I have to add a little more polish when this, I'm going to lose a bunch, it'll chunk off like that. But I'll just keep going at this for probably a couple minutes until it's, like I said, I don't want it shiny, but just I want most of those big scratches out of there. And if you look already, it's getting a little bit better. So I'm going to do this for, 3-4 minutes, and then I'll get back to you. So here's the finished crown. It's nothing crazy, nothing fancy. I'm not gonna go ahead and put like a crazy bevel on it. It's not a like a 6.5 Creedmoor rifle or something that I need precision out of. It's a scatter gun. I'm gonna be shooting buckshot. Honestly, even though it's a shorter barrel, I'll probably just take it out, shoot some clay pigeons with it, have fun with it. I don't know how it'll do, but yeah, it'll be enjoyable. I polished it up for only a couple minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and it's pretty good. You can still see some of the sanding marks, but that's fine. I don't need this absolutely perfect. I did, like I said earlier, I got a little overzealous on the top, and you can see there's a couple little scratches there, but that's on the outside. That really shouldn't affect any flight or anything. And like I said, this is not a precision weapon or precision, target rifle by any means. It's a shotgun. I'm pretty happy with it. The outside bevel is pretty good. It's fairly consistent all the way around. This is my first time doing this. I'm sure if I do more, I'll end up getting better with time. But it's just a decent little bevel. I really just knocked off the corner on the outside with the file, and then on the inside, like I said, I just kind of sanded it and made sure it wasn't a sharp edge anymore. I have the old chunk of barrel that I cut off. I'm going to show you that for comparison. So here's the two side by side. This side is what this side looked like right when I first cut it. It's all the rough hacksaw marks, a little bit of like ripping from cutting it with the dull blade. On the flip side of that is the old crown. So it looks like the outside bevel on the old one is a little bit deeper than the bevel I put on mine. I'm fine with it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm happy with it where it's at now, except for that little nick on top. But if I feel like if I go to try to bevel it more, I'll probably end up just screwing it up and making it out of round or something. Inside is about the same. All I did was really just cut off that sharp edge on the inside. So that's fine. What's nice about these trench gun builds, or what I would assume is nice about the trench gun builds, is your bead is actually on top of your heat shield. So you don't have to do like a tiny little drill and tap job up top to get a new bead in, or you don't have to solder one on. I know they make ones that you can put on with like silver solder, but I don't have to worry about that. I'm just going to slide the heat shield on, and there'll be a bead up there. So the next portion of this project is going to be getting this heat shield tapped on. I'll probably find like a piece of like PVC pipe or something to slip over the heat shield, like right on the top. That way I can tap it into the barrel without dinging anything up. The fun part is going to be, let's see if I can get this on camera, these little cross screws. Let's see. Yeah, you can kind of see it in there. They actually go in, like upwards from the bottom of the heat shield, and are going to slide through little notches that I'm going to have to cut in this barrel. So what I'm going to do is take out the screws from the heat shield right now, tap the heat shield into position, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark on the barrel where I'm going to make those screw notches. It's important you don't want to cut too deep. You're going to go ahead and just file just enough to get those screws on. If you cut too deep, you'll weaken the structural integrity of the barrel. If you cut really deep, you'll actually cut into the barrel. So I'm going to make sure I don't do that. I'm just going to use a little rat tail file. A lot of people will use a drill press, but I don't want to risk it walking. I do have a drill press, but I'm going to do this by hand just because I'm going to file it bit by bit and test fit it until the screws are perfectly aligned. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and tap this heat shield on. I'll be right back. The heat shield is on. I gotta admit that was a fairly Herculean task to get that on there. It's a very, very tight fit. As you can tell, there is probably a burr inside this particular shield. I did get a couple little scratches right there on the barrel. That's fine. I may either use some cold glue to touch that up, or honestly, more likely than not, I will just keep it as is. Looks like I got another little scratch on that side. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to artificially wear the heat shield down a little bit to make it match the rest of the shotgun. I may just honestly neglect cleaning the thing after shooting it a couple times. Let the heat shield maybe get a little bit of rust on it and then clean that off with some oil and make sure I stop the rust, obviously. But just let it wear into the shotgun the natural way. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I actually didn't even have to use any like PVC pipe or anything like that to go around the shield, or like around the barrel and just touch the heat shield to get it on. I was actually able to tap it most of the way on just with the rubber mallet. And once I got even with the barrel, I went just a little bit further and I was able to just use the bayonet lug to tap it on. Nothing bent or anything, so that was good. Pretty happy with how this looks. It's pretty mean looking. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is what I was talking about here. Let's see if she'll focus. If you look through the holes there, you can see right at the top of the hole running horizontally, that is the barrel sticking through there. So I'm actually going to have to stick a little rat tail file in there and just file out the barrel. Like I said, a lot of people will run a drill press through here. At least that's what I'm reading on the forums and such. There's really no video showing it. They'll run a drill press, or run a drill bit with a press through these holes. My concern with that is if it walks at all, I'll end up destroying the threads in the heat shield and not having a way to screw the screws in. So I'm just going to take a file and bit by bit take down that barrel until obviously the screws fit. I should note too that the reason I have this giant ass monkey wrench here is because every once in a while, I'd be tapping the heat shield on, and I would notice that the front would start kind of going on at an angle. So I just wrapped that right around the back end of the bayonet lug and the rest of the shield and just kind of gave it a little twist. I had straightened everything out. I had to check it a few times to make sure all was good, but it is pretty straight now. Alrighty, so the bolts that came with the heat shield were pretty poor quality. As you can tell, this one's all stripped out. Happened to two of them. This is one I didn't use. So the threads, you see, they go almost all the way down to the bottom, and then these two I tried tossing in there and they got stripped pretty bad. So what I ended up doing was I scrounged through some of my spare parts and I found a couple of these here old-timey bolts. They're not blued, but they actually kind of match the patina of the rifle the shotgun fairly well. They're old. So what I ended up doing was taking my Dremel and cutting them down to roughly the same length, a little bit longer than these, just to give myself a little bit of clearance. And I'm just going to toss them through the holes that the original bolts go through. The thread pitch looks to be a hair coarser, but I have a feeling that the inside of the heat shield may be stripped as well. So I'm just going to slather this up with Loctite. I know it's a bit of a ghetto fix, but I'm going to slather this up with Loctite and just screw it through the heat shield as best as I can. The friction fit is fairly well, so really all this is doing is making a mechanical bond, keeping the the heat shield from backing off the barrel. So with the trench cut in the barrel, the little notch, that pin will kind of sit through there as so and just keep it from, keep the heat shield from walking out of the barrel mechanically. It doesn't really have to be necessarily even threaded. The same thing is accomplished with like AR-15 gas blocks with a just like a cross pin. So I was a little upset about this, but it should work just fine. It matches the gun. It's not really original, but it seems to work all right. So I'll show you what that looks like once those are in. Here's those screws I was talking about. Guess I'm going to have a historical inaccuracy here. These are Phillips head bolts as opposed to the original, which were flathead. That's fine though, the color matches all right. Coming around the side here, and they are sticking out just a touch, but that's fine. I'd prefer a little bit of extra to having them not going through all the way. Overall, it wasn't too bad. I got this heat shield off of Sarco. I think it's the same ones that Numrich used to offer, the reproduction ones. The heat shield in itself seems fairly high quality, but those bolts were just absurdly soft. So it is on there now with a really tight friction fit, as well as the bolts going across and through the channels in the barrel. I know originally I said I was going to actually file those, but I actually didn't have a file small enough to get in there. My smallest rat tang file, the little circle guy, was a little bit larger than the actual holes in the heat shield. So I did end up using a drill. I was very careful with that. I don't think I screwed up any of the threads, because when I looked in there with a flashlight, everything seemed all nice and thready still. But like I said, those bolts just got absolutely destroyed. Probably just because of the slight friction where the heat shield isn't, before the bolts go in, it's not quite clamped down and really tight. So the bolts are what kind of have to pull it together. And I think they just couldn't stand up to that little extra pressure that they needed to withstand. Anyway, I got that on. All the metal work is now done. The only thing I have to do now is back here on the stock. Right around the middle of the stock, a little bit closer to the back end, I have to install a sling swivel. The trench guns have a little bit of a notch cut out. Let's see, right about here it comes up and is cut just a little bit. And then a 1903 style sling swivel is installed. The bayonet lug has the front swivel, so that's already good to go. Another historical inaccuracy that I think I'm actually fine with, that way nobody, tries to tell me that I'm trying to fake one and pass it off as real, is the checkering in the stock. The original trench guns don't have any checkering at all. And actually, that's not entirely true. Originally, some of the Stevens were just commercial variants that got pressed into service, and they did exactly what I just did. They cut down the barrel and put the heat shield on. But once they started actually kicking up production for the war, they stopped putting any checkering or any sort of gripping on the stock and on the fore end. I've looked into fore end reproduction wood, and for just a plain non-checkered fore end, it's $40 to $60, which isn't bad, but I kind of like it as is. I think I'm just going to actually leave it. It doesn't look too bad. And it breaks up the monotony of the wood a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the sling swivel area, and then that should be the end of it. So the sling swivel sits quite a bit further back than I initially thought. It is almost right at the end of the stock. So I got that marked out there. And I'm just going to go ahead and take my sanding bit on my Dremel, nothing fancy at all there, and just take a very small scoop right out of the stock. Not too crazy, just like I said before, just enough to get the sling swivel down about flush with the stock. So a little work with the Dremel and some sandpaper, and the notch is cut. If you ever do this, take a word of advice from earlier and tape where you don't want to hit. I did have a file skid there and there. That would have been easily preventable if I put a little masking tape over it. That doesn't look too bad though, a little bit of oil and that'll fix right up. So what I'm going to do now, that's not quite perfect, but I'll get that in with the screws. What I'm going to do now is take some raw linseed oil and mix a little bit of that with a little bit of stain and go ahead and toss that in the freshly filed and sanded area. And then I'll get the drill 2 little pilot holes. Always drill a pilot hole. If you don't drill a pilot hole, your wood can split. So I'm going to drill some 2 little pilot holes and get some screws in there and get my sling swivel on. Little stain and oil did the trick in there. Obviously you can still see a little of the scratch marks. I'll add a couple more coats of oil, buff it a little bit with some steel wool. That should go away. Alright, gonna go ahead and drill those holes and get the swivel mounted up. The sling swivel is on. I actually decided to leave the scratches because it just kind of goes with the stock. If you look, there's some other dings on here that have been here for some time. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave that worn look on there. It doesn't bother me one bit. Got the swivel on. Everything is finally complete. 2 more things to add. I got a sling I'm going to pop on now, and then a bayonet, which I'm still looking for a 1917 pattern bayonet. So let's go ahead and get this sling installed. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. I'll start with the back end because that's easy. That's just a clip-on. This is just an M1 Garand sling. Bought it off of Amazon. The CMP sells them too. It's a little more difficult than I thought. Give me 1 second. I'm going to need both hands, and I'll get right back to you. At long last, she is finally complete. Sling is installed. And note how it goes through the front loop. And then on the back end is where you clip it. A lot of people do that backwards. The back end is where you clip it. And this loop here you can actually adjust if you're shooting rifles to take this off of the back loop and sling your arm through it. And that'll give you a more steady platform for taking long shots. In a shotgun, you're probably never going to do that. I'm very, very happy with how this turned out though. I did actually end up taking some cold blue to the crown and bluing that crown. That'll prevent it from rusting, giving it a little more durable of a finish, and just looks more well done, a better finish on there. I did, even though I cold blued the front of it, I did still leave these scratches in here from the burr. Let's see if I'll pick that up. Yeah, right there's a couple scratches. I actually kind of liked it. I like the rough wear and tear look out of the shotgun. And I don't think I'm gonna do any refinishing to actually give it a more new look. I like how it looks all old and been there, done that, even though it was just a hunting shotgun previously. I do still want to add the bayonet lug. I actually found one on eBay, or sorry, not the bayonet lug, the bayonet. Found one on eBay that looked to be in really, really good shape. So I ordered that. That should be here in a few days. When that gets here, I'll go ahead and mount that up to the shotgun and show you what the entire project looks like, totally finished from top to bottom. I'll probably end up taking a couple pictures too and rolling them in with the video. Thanks for sticking around with me, And I really hope this was informative for anybody else who's trying to make a trench gun or do anything similar to this. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.